Today we will go over chapter 8 or module 8 of our Excel textbook. This is a very, very important and very useful and popular tool that we are going to learn today. It is called PivotTables and PivotCharts. This is basically the turning point at which many people who basically argue that they know how to work with Excel, they stop there. Okay, so this is basically a kind of a competitive advantage for you if you know how to work with pivot tables. This is actual data analysis with Excel. Okay, before that, it is mainly building beautiful tables. Okay, and putting numbers in a pleasable way. Okay, but pivot table is basically the turning point from which you can state that you are a data analyst and you can analyze data with Excel. Okay, so let me go ahead. So again, like every other Excel module, you have your textbook project, your textbook basically reading, and the SAM training, which is going to be due next week, and project B, which is going to be due next week. Okay, you also have your project 1 and 2, which are optional. You can go ahead and practice, and in class we will go over project A, SAM project A. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start with project A. Again, like previous modules, we will have a document, a instruction, and also a spreadsheet. Okay, so let's go ahead and download both and open them up, start working on them. So this is the instructions. And this is the spreadsheet. So I make the spreadsheet part a little bit bigger so we have enough square footage to work on this. So again, the first step, as always, is to check visually that everything is correct and save it as _2. Change the last character, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so let me make this a little bigger. So Sandra Russo is an account manager at M&K Merchants Bank, where she consults with businesses of all sizes to help them be successful and profitable. Sandra is using an Excel workbook to analyze the financial performance of Home Chef, the market leader in producing mid-range kitchen utensils. She asks for your help in creating pivot tables and pivot charts to provide an overview of Home Chef's customers, regional sales, pricing, and product line. Go to the orders worksheet, which contains a table of data named order, and add a new order as the last record in the orders table using data shown in table 1. Okay, so we go to the orders tab or worksheet. Basically, here we have a table. Okay, so this is a table, it's not a range, and at the end we are adding this record. Okay, so keep this in mind that at the very beginning of this activity, we added another line, okay, to this table. We added another record to this table. Okay, so line or rows are records, columns are fields. We'll get back to this in a second. Okay, so keep this in mind. We will get back to this, why we did this. Okay, what is the significance of doing this? Okay, cool. Okay, so CS20, this is the customer number. The region is Atlantic, and order number is 1525. Date is 8/17/2021. The product is tongs, and quantity is 10. Unit price is 1575, and discount is 2.5%. The rest is being calculated automatically. okay? So far we didn't do anything new. We just added another row to the table and everything would be calculated and everything. But just remember that we did this, okay? We'll get back to this. Now, step 2, Sandra wants to create a separate table displaying the products each customer ordered and the total price. To provide this information, create and format a pivot table as follows. Before doing that, okay, suppose that we don't know what is a pivot table, okay? How can we do this, okay? Let's spend a minute on this. So far, with what you have learned in Excel, okay, you want to build a table or another means, or another method, displaying the products that each customer ordered, okay, and the total price of that, okay? For example, you want to know what is the product that CS5 ordered and what is the total. What is the product that CS7 ordered and what is the total, and so on and so forth. How do you do that? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look how we can do this. You have every right to be confused a little because this is a rather complex task to do. Okay, what we are doing, we are creating a table called pivot table, quote unquote, that puts different fields. Okay, fields, and again I put it in quote unquote. Fields are columns. Okay, puts different fields in a table. Okay, so it basically takes 2 fields, 3 fields, and cross-tabulates them in one table. Okay, let's see what I'm talking about. Okay, so first thing that you need to do is to click somewhere on this table and then go to insert. Okay, and then the first option is pivot table. Okay, so insert the pivot table and insert a pivot table on the new worksheet based on the orders table. So this is based on the orders table. This is the orders table. And you want it to be on a new worksheet. So far it's just mechanical. We're building this pivot table. We will get to it. What does it mean? And then once we click OK, we see a few things here. Okay, so then let's follow what has been instructed to do, and let's see what happens. Okay, use orders and price pivot as the name for the worksheet. Okay, so first let's change the name, orders and price pivot. Okay. Now it says that add the customer field to the rows area of the pivot table. Okay, so I have a few things here. First of all, tell me, what is this? What are these fields? Good. You see that this is my table. These are different fields of my table. When I'm building a pivot table, all these fields are here. Okay. So now, what I need to do, add customer field to the rows area. So I take the customer, drag it, and drop it on the rows. Add the product field to the columns area. So I take product, drag, drop in the columns. So you see that I have a table now. Okay. So just by magic, I have a little table which cross-tabulates 2 columns in a table. Okay, so basically takes 2 columns and make them columns and rows. Okay, so now the most important part, the last part, is basically adding what you want to have in the body of the table. Okay, add the total field to the values area. So total field, we take the total and put it in the values. Okay, now you see I have a table. For example, I know that customer CS3 has ordered the spatulas and tongs, and $180 for spatulas, tongs $250 to $52, a total of $432. Okay, boom, you have answer to all what you asked in that step. Okay, now I need to do a little cosmetics, change the settings, change the value field setting for the sum of totals to apply a counting number. So these sum of totals that are here are basically money. They are dollar values. So I want it to be dollar value. So what I do is I click on it, okay? Click on this little I here. And then click on number and change it to accounting, okay? So here's accounting, and I don't want any decimals. It says use 0 decimals and dollar symbol, okay? Click OK, click OK again, and this is my table cleaned up, basically, okay? Now, next step says change the appearance of your pivot table as follows to make it more attractive. Okay, so we are changing the appearance of the table. Okay, We need to change it to dark teal pivot table style dark 4. Okay, so we click on one of these cells and then go to design, and under design we select the one that has been asked for. So it is dark, and this is the dark teal pivot style dark 4. Okay, so this is how we can change the style. We just click and hide the field headers in the pivot table to make it more compact. Again, remember, I told you that these are two columns that have been basically cross-tabulated. Okay, so here it says that these are the row labels and gives you a little filter so you can choose among your customers, for example. It gives you a little filter again here, column labels, choose between the products. Remember, we cross-tabulated products and customers, okay? So we can keep these two column labels and row labels. These are called field headers, or we can remove them, okay? Here we have been asked to remove them. Okay, so what we need to do is to go to pivot table analyze, and at the end, at the very end, on the top right of the ribbon, we have field headers. If you click on it, you can toggle on and off. Okay, we need to toggle it off. Now, so it's more compact now. So let's see if everything is done. Yep. Okay, so now number 4, return to the orders. Return to the orders worksheet. Sandra wants to display the order totals by region. Okay, insert a recommended pivot table based on orders table as follows. Okay, insert the sum of total by region recommended pivot table. Okay, so this is a little thing you need to pay a little attention here. There is such a thing as a recommended pivot table. If you are using a PC, okay, it has all these steps. So for example, if you click on the recommended pivot table, it gives you the choice for different types of pivot tables. In Mac, however, when you do this recommended pivot table, it just goes ahead and creates one recommended pivot table. So it's a little different. We don't have this step B in a Mac, okay? So we go here, click on insert, and instead of insert and clicking on pivot table, click on recommended pivot table, okay? Again, it just goes ahead and makes the most recommended, or the most basically common type of pivot table for you, but we need to customize it. Sorry. Okay, so now what needs to be done? Totals by region pivot. Okay, so here we need to have regions and totals. Okay, so we don't need dates. Okay, get rid of this, and we put the regions here. Okay, so we have our regions in rows. Okay, total by regions, and we have the sum of total values here. Okay, again, this number, this title, this format of this sum of total should change. It says change the number of format of the sum of totals field to accounting with 2 decimals. Again, we click on this little I here, go to number, change it to accounting, 2 decimals and $sign. Click OK, one more OK, and now here we have a pivot table that shows different regions and the sum of the total sales in each of these regions, and the grand total of all regions together. Okay. Now let's move to step 5. Sandra decides a chart would help to analyze the order data on the totals by region pivot worksheet. Okay. So this was totals by region pivot. Okay, so let me totals by region pivot. Okay, so in this table, insert a stacked column pivot chart. Okay, resize and reposition, and so on and so forth. So pivot chart. What is a pivot chart? Same way that we have pivot tables, we can build pivot charts from pivot tables. Okay, so how we do that? So we click somewhere on this pivot table. Okay, and then we go to pivot table analyze. Okay, and here on the right, we have pivot chart. Okay, so we click on the pivot chart and it basically creates one pivot chart for you. Okay, so we need to have the type of this pivot chart should be a stacked column pivot chart. So we click on it and we go to design. Okay, and we change the chart type to column and make it a stacked column. Okay, so a stacked column is the second one here. And you see that nothing changed, but in a second you will see why we did this. Okay, so far we are just changing this table that we have, it's pivot table, to a chart. Okay, so far it's basically what we have done in the past, but it's a pivot chart. Okay, and so you need to move it and resize and reposition it to put the upper left corner in D3. So this is D3 and the lower right corner in K17. Okay, so here is K and here is 17. Okay, so far we have built our chart and pivot table. Next step is Home Chef sales representatives earn a 10% dividend on each order. Add the dividend data to the pivot chart as follows so that Sandra can compare the totals and dividends. Okay, so basically we are adding something to this table and to this chart that has not been in the chart or table at all. Okay, so we are adding something called a calculated field. Okay, so we need to add a calculated field to the pivot chart. So how do we do that? We click on it. Okay, and under the field items and sets, we have calculated field. Okay, so we click on calculated field, and the name of this calculated field is dividends. So we change the name, dividends. And the formula here is going to be total times 0.1. Okay, so my total is here. These are again all the fields that I have in my original table. Okay, so my formula is going to be total times 0.1. 10% of total basically is the commission or dividend. Okay, so click on that, and now you see that those little commissions or dividends. This is why we did this stacked column. Okay, so this has been taken care of, and now we can go to step 7. In step 7, it says go to product worksheet. Products is here. Go to products worksheet, which contains a pivot table named products. Modify the products pivot table so that it's easier to interpret as follows. Okay, so here we have a pivot table pre-built, and now we need to change some stuff in this. Okay, remove the customer field from the rows area to focus on products and region data. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to pivot table analyze and click on field list for this list to show up. And here you see that we have different rows. Okay, we have the product, we have region, and we have customer. They are all cascading basically. It's asking us to remove customers from the rows, remove the customer field from the row. Okay, so what we need to do, we just drag this and drop it somewhere and let it go. It basically gets removed the same way that we do anything else in a Mac. And then next step is change the report layout of the pivot table to compact form. Okay, so how do we do that? We click here and we click on the design. Okay, and here we want to change the report layout to compact form. So report layout is here. We click on it and we click on show in compact form. Okay, what happens, it stacks all these rows underneath each other. Okay, so one more time, you see that we have, for example, here 2 rows. We have ladles and Midwest Pacific. We have these 2 rows in 2 different columns, okay, next to each other. But when you change the report to compact, this second basically row comes under the first row. Okay, so when you put it in compact form, ladles, and then Midwest and Pacific, spatulas, Midwest, Southwest, Pacific, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then we need to turn off the grand totals for rows and columns. You see that we have a grand total here, we need to get rid of this. How do we do that? We have a grand total here. We click on it and we say off for rows and columns. Okay, we don't have a grand total anymore. And then we need to add subtotals at the top of the groups. Basically, what's happening is that, for example, for ladles, we want a subtotal. For spatulas, for skimmers, and so on and so forth. For each of these, we need a subtotal. Okay, so how do we do that? We click on subtotals. Okay, and we have two options. We can show it on the top, at the top, and at the bottom. Okay, here it says that show it at the top of the group. Okay, so we click on this, show all subtotals at top of group. Okay, you see that subtotal appears here, here, and so on and so forth. Okay, now refresh the data source so that it displays accurate data, including the new record you added to the orders table. Okay, so if you remember, we started this whole exercise by adding a new row to the orders and price pivot. Okay, so this is one of the important things about pivot tables. Pivot tables are not dynamic. Okay, they are static. The reason is that they are a report from a database. They are a query from a database. Okay, and this query should be basically static because you need this report to be used somewhere. Okay, then make decisions based on, and so on and so forth. So when the source changes, it should not change unless you refresh it. Okay, so every time that you add something, you need to refresh the pivot table. So here it's asking us to refresh the data. So we click refresh, and that new line that we have added would be added to this table. Okay, now Sandra wants to display the average discount for each product rather than the sum of discount values in the products pivot table. Modify the products pivot table as follows. Okay, so here instead of sum, we want to have the average. Change the value field setting for sum of discounts value to determine the average discount. Okay, so sum of discounts is here. We want to change it to average. So we click on this little I here, and first we need to change the name to average discount. So change it to average discount and make it average. Okay, and the formatting should be percentage with 1 decimal. So we click on number, percentage, 1 decimal. Okay, okay, and now we have average discount here in this column, and these are all 1 decimal and percentage. Okay, next step, Sandra wants to change the format of average discounted price values, which are difficult to interpret. So you see these numbers are pretty hard to interpret and really not consistent with each other in terms of formatting. Okay, so what we need to do is to take care of the formatting of this. It says that modify the average discounted price values by applying the currency number format with 2 decimal places and dollar symbol so that these values are easier to understand. So again, this is the field that I have here, average discounted price. Okay, is this one? No, this is average discount. So it's going to be this one, average discounted price. Okay, so we want to change the formatting here. I click on this little number here, and I want to change the format to currency with 2 decimals and dollar symbol. It's all good. I click OK and OK, and you see that all these average discounted prices are now basically consistent with each other, 2 decimal places and dollar symbols. Okay. Number 11, step 11, go to the monthly sales worksheet. Okay, so let's go here to monthly sales. Again, you see here we have a little pre-built pivot table, and which contains a pivot table named monthly sales. Sandra wants to provide another way to visualize this data. Create a pivot chart as follows. Okay, so we are building a pivot chart again. Create a clustered column pivot chart based on the monthly sales pivot table. So we click somewhere on this table, go to pivot table analyze, okay, and we click on pivot chart. Okay, we want this pivot chart to be a clustered column pivot chart, so we click somewhere on it and go to design and go to change the chart type, Click on column, and we want it to be a clustered column. So this is the first option that we have here. So far we just built it. Now we need to move and resize it. It should be upper left should be in A20. So let me go ahead and move this to A20. And lower right should be in G38. So G38. So we just moved and resized it. Now add the title monthly sales to the pivot chart in the above position. So this is again something that we have done a lot in the past. We are adding a title, chart title above chart, and it should be called monthly sales. So monthly sales. This is the title of my table. And then we need to apply layout 3 to pivot chart to display the legend at the bottom of the chart. So we click on it and we go to design, and these are quick layouts. We want to apply layout 3. This is the third layout, or layout 3. So now we have applied layout 3. Okay, now this is something rather interesting. Step 12, what we are going to do here in step 12. It says add a slicer to the pivot chart as follows to make it easy for Sandra to filter the data. Okay, so slicer, what is the slicer? Let's take a quick look. Okay, here it says add a slicer to the pivot chart based on the region field. Okay, so we click on the pivot chart and go to the pivot chart analyze. Okay, and here you see that we have insert slicer. Okay, what does a slicer do? Okay, it says which field do you want? Here we have been told to choose the region field. So we go to region, click on region, select it, okay it, and you see we have a little slicer here. Okay, so let me take care of step B, and I will explain what it is. Okay, position the slicer so that upper left corner is within H20 and J33. So H20 and J33. Okay, so what is this? It is a little basically interactive tool for working with this graph, working with this chart. Basically, if I click, for example, on Atlantic, this table and as well as this chart would be filtered only for Atlantic. If I click on Midwest, same thing, Pacific, same thing. If I click if I hold down Command and select two of them, for example, Pacific and Midwest would appear, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is what a slicer is. Okay, and number 13, Sandra thinks the Midwest quantity amount for September seems high. Examine details of this amount as follows. Okay, so Midwest and September. So this is September and this is Midwest. So this 35. Sandra thinks that this 35 is too high. Okay, so this is one of the beauties of PivotTable. Okay, you look at this 35 and say that, okay, this is too much. Okay, you want to find out why this 35 is so high and where it is coming from. The way you can do this is called drilling down, is just double clicking on it. Okay, so drilling down is double click. You double click on it and boom, you get another table that shows what's happening in the Midwest. Two customers, CS12 and CS4, had made these purchases, wooden spatula and ladles, and these are the quantities and all the details, and this is the price. Okay, so it basically builds another table for you for that specific value that you are interested in, and this is called drilling down. So this needs to be titled SEP Midwest. So let me go ahead and take care of that. SEP Midwest, and let's move to step 14. Go to the region pivot chart worksheet. Okay, so region pivot chart is this pivot chart, which shows the May product orders in the Pacific region based on the data in the regions worksheet. Sandra wants to compare all the product order amounts, not just those for May. Modify and format the pivot chart as follows to show all months. So first, refresh the pivot table to make sure it contains updated order information. Again, same thing that we had for pivot tables, we have for PivotChart. They are a report, they are static. We need to refresh them if we are adding information to our database, if we are adding a rows to our database. So we click on refresh, now it contains everything. Now change the PivotChart filter to compare data for all month. Okay, so now let's take a look at this. So you see that here it has a filter for date. Okay, we don't need this. We need this is right now it's only showing month of May. We want to change it to all month. Okay, so this pivot chart has been built based on this pivot table, based on this regions pivot table. So if you take a look here, you see that here there's a little filter that only shows May. Okay, you see that little funnel here. So we click on that and we select everything. So this pivot table now is unfiltered. And when you go back to our pivot chart that's based on that, you see that our pivot chart is now also not filtered. Okay, so here it's showing everything. And then it says apply style 10 to the pivot chart to display the data more clearly. Okay, so we want to change the style here. We go to design and select this drawer here, and we select style 10. Okay, this is our style 10. Now our pivot chart is more readable. Number 15, step 15, go to the discounted price worksheet. So this is my discounted price worksheet. Again, I have a pivot table and I have a little slicer here. Sandra wants this pivot table to focus on customers, not order numbers. Okay, so you see that here we have order numbers and customers. Okay. Customers not order numbers, reorder the field in the rows area so that the pivot table displays data first by customer and then by order number. Okay, so here we have order number and then customer, order number, customer. We want to switch this. How do we do that? We click somewhere on this pivot table and then we go to pivot table analyze, click on field list. So it shows all the fields, columns, rows and values and filters. And here under rows, you see that we have order number and customer. This is basically the order, okay, of these fields. We want it to be first customer and then second order number. We just change it. We drag it and drop it under the order number. So now it is customer and then order number. You see that it is customer 1 with these 3 order numbers, customer CS5, these orders, and so on and so forth. So you change you see how flexible and how basically powerful pivot table is compared to regular tables and ranges that we have worked with so far. Okay. Let's see if there is anything missing here. Okay, so now let's move to step 16. Sandra is interested in the performance of the Pacific region during the month of September and October, okay, which were the month of the most sales for kitchen utensils. Filter the pivot table as follows to show the data that Sandra requests. Use the region slicer to filter the pivot table and display Pacific region orders only. Okay, so you see that we have a slicer here. You can click on Pacific, and in a second, the table will change to only values for the Pacific region. Okay. Then it says add a second slicer based on the date field. Okay, so we click here and go ahead and under pivot table analyze, we click on insert a slicer. And this slicer should be based on the date field. Okay, so we click date, click OK, and we bring the slicer here. Should be on J18. So this is J18. And K28, so K28, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, very good. Okay, so now use the data slicer to filter the pivot table and display September and October. Okay, so here we just want September and October. So we click on September, then Command, or if you're using a PC, controlled September and October, we choose both. So this table now, this pivot table now is filtered for Pacific only in September and October. Okay, and basically you can do anything that you want with these slicers. And it's a very interactive way of doing it. So basically, if you are creating a report or a dashboard for your manager, it's pretty easy for that person to click on these and see different reports from one basically worksheet. So we took care of that as well. Let's go to step 17. Now go to product pricing worksheet. So product pricing is right here. You see that we have a little pivot table here. For each product and customer, Sandra wants to compare the unit price with the average discounted price, starting with products that have the most orders. She also wants to display the product pricing data by month. To provide this information, modify the product pricing pivot table as follows. A, first we need to sort the pivot table based on the sum of quantity field, okay? Sorting from largest to smallest and top to bottom. So sum of quantity is here. So we click on one of these cells, right click, sort from largest to smallest, okay? So that is something that we have done so far a lot. So this is nothing new. Then add the discounted price field to the bottom of the values area of the pivot table. So let's go ahead and click on the pivot table analyze, show the fields list. Now what we need to add is the discounted price to the bottom of the values, okay? So we need to add another value here, basically discounted price. Take the discounted price, drag it and drop it here under the values, okay? And change the value field setting for the sum of discounted values to determine the average discounted price. So by default, it is sum of discounted prices. We want to change it to average. We click on that I, change it to average, and the format should be accounting with 2 decimals and dollar symbol. Okay, so we click on number, accounting, 2 decimals and dollar symbol, all good. Click OK twice, and you get your average of discounted price for each of these regions. So you see now that we have sorted it based on the quantity, and we created another field in this, we added another field in the table, which is the average of discounted prices. And again, we have that in the accounting format, okay? And we have the dollar sign and everything, okay? Now, next thing is the add the date field to the filters area of the pivot table. So you see that we have a pivot in the pivot table fields. We have a filter area as well. Okay, so it's basically like the slicer thing. Okay, when we add things to add fields to the filter, it works like the slicer, but it's in a different graphical way. So we drag date and drop it here in the filters. You see that it gives me a little basically filtering tool on the top. Okay, and filter the product pricing pivot table to display January order data only. So right now it is everything. So we want to have it only for January. We select only, deselect everything and only select January. You see that now I have a pivot table for all the January sales data. And so I filtered my pivot table basically with this little date being added to the field, to the filters field. Okay, so we did that, and finally step 18 says return to the orders worksheet. So we are going back to all the way to the orders worksheet right here. And Sandra wants to display the quantity of the orders in the Southeast region. Okay, so you see that here it is there's a little summary table, and this Southeast region is missing. Okay, so we want to get this information from this monthly sales worksheet. Okay, so this part might be a little counterintuitive, so bear with me and pay a little more attention here. So when we are referring to a cell, okay, referring to a cell in a pivot table, we cannot just say equal such and such cell, okay? Or even if we do that, what Excel would do is uses this function, GETPIVOTDATA. Okay, let's do it and see what happens. Okay, so what's happening is that we want to go to monthly sales worksheet. Okay, so this is my monthly sales worksheet, and we want to get the grand total of the Southeast region. Okay, so Southeast region is here, and this is the grand total. Okay, so I click on it, and you see that instead of saying that it is D18 from this sheet, it's giving me this mumbo jumbo. Okay, so let's take a look at this and see what it is. Okay, so let's dissect it a little bit. Okay, so you see that this is a function, GETPIVOTDATA. Okay, what is it doing? It's getting quantity from this monthly sales data. Okay, so one more time. It's going to the monthly sales table, okay, and getting quantity, okay, and filtering it only the quantity of region Southeast. Okay, so basically, again, it's a little needs a little more attention. Pay much attention when you are doing the exercise here. It is basically referring to another table, but when you are referring to another table using and referring to another pivot table, pivot table does not only says that it's equal to, for example, E18 in such and such table. It gets information from that database and uses GETPIVOTDATA. The reason is that pivot tables are not tables. They are reports, and each of these cells can change all the time. Okay, the name says it all. It's pivot table, meaning that it always pivots. Okay, it always changes when you do different things to it. It changes. So when you're referring to a cell, if you refer to, for example, E18, that E18 could show different things at different times based on how you pivot it and filter it and do this and that. Okay, so that's why when you're referring to a cell, this GETPIVOTDATA function would be applied. Okay, so that is that. It gets the that 35, which is the grand total of the Southeast region from the monthly sales data, and now there's reported here. Okay, so that basically concludes the pivot table work. This video is going to be available. You can go back to it and take a look, and also when you do the assignment, your assignment, which is the first part of your assignment specifically, here, the SAM training, when you do this, that will basically walk you through all these steps, step by step. You remember that has 3 different parts. You can first watch the video, the interactive video, then practice, and finally apply. So go ahead and do all those 3 for all the steps here in the module 8 training. And then after that, go ahead and do project B. Project B would be very similar to what we have done here so far.